let's do 22807 first. This was an application by the local Centerport Civic Association, represented by Mr. Darren Berger, for a request of this board in the nature of an appeal to overrule the temporary certificate of occupancy that was issued to the Water's Edge by the Town of Huntington Building Department in April of 2021. In addition, there was a request to overrule the public assembly permit that was issued by the town agency as well on the same date, and ostensibly to revoke a special use permit, which I'll discuss in a minute, and then to determine that there was a change in the zone that was argued to us, and to determine that there was an absence of the use which made the non-conforming use of the restaurant and the catering hall against the law, ultra vires. So this matter is basically a legal matter, and there is a lengthy memorandum issued to all of us on the board by our Zoning Board of Appeals attorney, John Bennett, indicating the law on all of these particular issues. Let me just say as an introductory type thing that the special use permit was never granted to the Water's Edge, and may have been granted to an adjoining property, but never to the Water's Edge. So there's nothing for us to have any jurisdiction over with regard to the special use permit. There was also some discussion and arguments with regard to a zone change, that we have no jurisdiction over zone change. It's strictly a town board matter, and we have no jurisdiction to do anything to change a zone in the town of Huntington of any kind. There was also some discussion on the record about whether or not an easement that was between two private parties was violated in some way, or became moot, or whatever other argument they may have indicated that had ceased its use, or was in some way, shape, or form no longer in force and effect. We have no jurisdiction over that whatsoever. That's a private matter between two private entities totally, and that would be, if any of those things are true, that's a matter for the courts to decide, not the Zoning Board of Appeals. In addition, the non-conforming use of the catering hall, which had heretofore been called Thatch Cottage and then ultimately is now operating as Water's Edge, was a prior non-conforming use. Has been used that way since apparently the 1920s and right through the current date. And any lapse that may have existed during that time frame has been adjudicated by a federal bankruptcy court that made a finding that the lapse of use was in the nature of approximately 6 weeks. So this is all by way of introduction to indicate that while the memorandum is all part of the record in our decision-making process, I'm going to make I will make the motion, which essentially will be to deny all the requests that the Zoning Board of Appeals was given for the temporary certificate of occupancy to overrule it. I might add one other thing to that before I even ask for a second, and that is that even though an appeal was taken for the temporary certificate of occupancy, a final certificate of occupancy was issued several months later, and no appeal was taken from that. So there is a legal argument contained in the memo that the temporary certificate of occupancy renders that entire request moot. So, but in the event that it doesn't, I'm making a motion to deny the request of the Civic Association through their attorney for a revocation of the temporary certificate of occupancy, and also to deny the request of the appeal of the public assembly permit, of which it was revealed at the hearing that that there was no proof that that was and somehow or another not appropriate. And as to the other matters, this board has no jurisdiction over any of it. I do want to indicate also on the record that Mr. Capabianco, who was not a member of our board back in May of 2022, has seen the entire matter on the air, because it's available to us now. This is something that technology has given us an opportunity to do that we heretofore didn't have several years ago. And I have asked him if he feels comfortable in also voting on this motion, and he has indicated that he feels strongly familiar with it and is capable of casting a vote. So my motion, Mr. Bennett, is there anything legally that I'm leaving out?
Chairman Asher, just on the motion, it's Capodanno, not Capabianco.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Capodanno. I'm showing my...
And I did watch the entire video, and I do feel fit, and thank you for your words.
Thank you, Mr. Capodanno. All right. It's taken me a long time to get Castagna right, so now I got to get Capodanno right. So, all right. Mr. Bennett, is there anything that I'm leaving out with respect to the legal issues that we faced on the Water's Edge application back in May of 2022?
No, I think you've covered everything, Mr. Chairman. Also, Mr. Berger, during the course of his presentation, had actually requested that we consider as part of the record the decision of Judge Grossman. So I would suggest that that decision be uploaded as part of the record as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, before we vote, because there were people there that night that spoke a lot of quality of life issues, so I just wondered if we could touch on why we sort of can't get involved in that. You mentioned it at a high level, and I was one of those folks. I thought the Thatch Cottage or Water's Edge now was operating under a special use permit, and therefore we would have continuing jurisdiction, and therefore there was a lot of evidence. It looked like convincing evidence about noise, lights being left on, certainly trucks being unloaded. And that seemed to, in addition to the legal arguments, seemed to be what brought people out to complain about. And this board could, if we had a special use permit, sort of come down on it, threaten to take it away, put them out of business. But in the absence of that, which I think everybody agrees, including the applicant or Mr. Berger, we really can't do anything, which just seems a little unfair to the residents for all the energy they've been fighting. And I wondered, as an agency, using our bully pulpit, if we could at least reach out to our code enforcement people and ask them to watch what we heard and witnessed that night to see if they can. We can't make them, but we could maybe advocate for them.
Mr. Bennett, can we establish something in writing to a code enforcement or some other agency of the town to
what we
reflect?
could do, Mr. Chairman, is we could take those sections of the testimony raised by the residents and some of the photographs that they had submitted to us during the course of the hearing that show parking issues on 25A, and forward them to code enforcement and ask that they look into the issues. Mr. McGrath is correct. We do not have special use jurisdiction. The special use permit was issued to the Jellyfish. It was never issued to Water's Edge. On the certificate of occupancy, the final certificate was never appealed. Relative to the public assembly permit, Fire Marshal McNally testified essentially that the occupancy, which was listed at 786 people, which was 40 persons less than the prior, just focuses on the number of people who can safely egress the building in the event of an emergency. It doesn't go to parking. And as to easements and whether or not an easement has been lost or not, that's not within the jurisdiction of this board. That's within the jurisdiction of a Supreme Court judge if there's a litigation or determination between the parties. But I think we could certainly forward the residents' comments to code enforcement.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bennett, for taking care of that. So I'll reiterate, I'll make the motion to deny the applicant's request. Do I have a second? Mr. Basso on the second. All in favor of the denial? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the denial passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Do we have one other matter on tonight, too, Mr. Bennett?
We do, Mr. Chairman. This is